The massive Alterian research vessel, Veltara, cut through the endless darkness of space like a gleaming silver blade. Its hull sparkled with thousands of sensor arrays, each one designed to detect the faintest trace of alien technology. For 3 months, the expedition had been hunting through the neutral zones, searching for artifacts that could unlock the secrets of other species. Dr. Kilthan pressed his four-fingered hands against the main display screen, his elongated head tilting. As data streams flowed past his compound eyes, as the expedition's lead xenobiologist, he had studied dozens of alien species, but humans remained the most puzzling. How could such a young, primitive race have survived in the hostile galaxy when far more advanced civilizations had fallen? "Doctor, we're picking up something unusual," called Navigator Vorex from her control station. Her pale blue skin shimmered under the bridge lights as she adjusted the long-range scanners. "It's big, and it's definitely not one of ours." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. Captain Nexara, her silver uniform marking her as ship's commander, moved closer to examine the readings. Her species had ruled this sector for over 2,000 years, and she had never seen energy patterns quite like these. "Analysis complete," Vorex announced, her voice rising with excitement. "It's definitely human origin. The energy signatures match their primitive fusion drives from what our historical databases call their Savage Wars period. Must be at least 300 years old." Dr. Kilthan's hearts began beating faster. A genuine human warship from their most violent era would be an incredible discovery. The Alterian Science Council had been trying to understand human military psychology for decades. Why did they fight so brutally? What drove their seemingly endless appetite for warfare? Through the main viewport, the derelict vessel slowly came into view. It hung motionless against the starfield like a dark metal coffin, its hull painted black and scarred by what looked like countless battles. Unlike the smooth, elegant curves of Alterian ships, this human vessel was all angles and harsh edges. Weapon mounts jutted from its surface like the spines of some prehistoric predator. "Look at those crude weapon systems," Dr. Kilthan observed, pointing at the external armaments with obvious disgust. "Such barbaric design philosophy. No elegance, no efficiency. Just brute force and destruction." Science Officer Melkara joined them at the viewport, her scanning equipment already analyzing the derelict's composition. The armor plating appears to be some kind of primitive composite material, much thicker than necessary, almost like they expected to take massive damage and keep fighting. "Typical human thinking," Captain Nexara said with a dismissive gesture. "They solve every problem with violence and overwhelming force. No subtlety, no intelligence." The research team gathered around the central holographic display as more detailed scans revealed the ship's layout. It was surprisingly large for a human vessel, with multiple decks and what appeared to be extensive manufacturing facilities built right into the hull. "Fascinating," Dr. Kilthan murmured, making notes on his portable datapad. "They literally built their ships as mobile weapons factories. The psychological implications are staggering. This level of militarization suggests a species driven entirely by aggression and paranoia." Navigator Vorex manipulated the display controls, rotating the image of the human ship. No life signs detected. The vessel appears to have been drifting for centuries. "Power systems are completely offline." "Perfect," Dr. Kilthan said, rubbing his hands together eagerly. "An intact human warship from their most violent period, with no interference from the primitives themselves. The Science Council will be thrilled." Captain Nexara gave the order to dock, and the Veltara's mechanical arms extended toward the human vessel. The process took several hours as they carefully cut through the thick armor plating to create an entry point. The human hull was much tougher than expected, requiring their most powerful cutting tools. "Their defensive technology is more sophisticated than we initially thought," reported Engineering Chief Torvak as his team finished the breach. "This armor isn't just thick, it's layered with multiple materials designed to absorb different types of energy weapons. Still primitive compared to our shielding systems," Dr. Kilthan replied dismissively. "They simply compensated for inferior technology with crude but effective materials." The first survey team entered the human ship through the artificial airlock they had created. Emergency lighting flickered on automatically as they moved through the corridors, casting eerie shadows on the metal walls. Everything was silent, except for the soft hiss of their breathing apparatus. Dr. Kilthan led his research team deeper into the vessel, their scanning equipment mapping every room and corridor. The ship's interior was just as brutal as its exterior. Bare metal walls, exposed conduits, and weapons storage areas on every deck. "Look at this," called Dr. Yelmora from what appeared to be an armory. "They have enough small arms here to equip a small army. Even their science vessels were prepared for ground combat." "Document everything," Dr. Kilthan ordered, his excitement growing with each discovery. "Every weapon, every piece of equipment, every design choice. We're looking at 3 centuries of human military evolution frozen in time." The team spread throughout the massive vessel, each specialist focusing on their area of expertise. The weapon systems, while primitive, showed surprising ingenuity. The life support systems were robust and redundant. Even the crew quarters suggested a species that expected to spend years at war. "No wonder they've survived so long," Dr. Kilthan muttered to himself as he examined what appeared to be a battle-damaged repair station. "They've turned warfare into a science." None of them noticed the faint power readings deep in the ship's core, or the single cryogenic pod that had just begun its warming cycle. Deep in the bowels of the human warship, research technician Yelmora was examining what looked like a simple power junction box. The Alterian's thin fingers traced the crude human wiring, making notes about their primitive electrical systems. He had been studying alien technology for 15 years, and human engineering never failed to amaze him with its brutal simplicity. "These humans just brute-forced everything," he muttered to his recording device. "No elegant solutions, no sophisticated power management, just thick cables and heavy-duty connections." Curious about the junction's function, Yelmora decided to activate it. After all, what harm could some auxiliary lighting do? He pressed what appeared to be a manual override switch, expecting nothing more than a few corridor lights to flicker on. Instead, the entire ship groaned to life around him. Emergency power systems that had been dormant for 3 centuries suddenly roared back to consciousness. Throughout the vessel, lights began flickering on in sequence, deck by deck, section by section. The hum of awakening machinery echoed through corridors that had been silent since humanity's greatest war. "What did you do?" Dr. Kilthan's voice crackled over the communication system, filled with concern. "I just activated a simple power coupling," Yelmora replied nervously, backing away from the now glowing control panel. "It should only be auxiliary. Power for basic systems." The other research team members throughout the ship began reporting similar phenomena. Computers were booting up, displaying streams of human text that their translation software couldn't immediately process. Environmental systems were cycling through startup procedures. Even the artificial gravity felt different, more stable and purposeful. "Everyone remained calm," Dr. Kilthan announced over the team channel. "These old human ships had basic automated systems designed to activate during boarding scenarios. It's just primitive programming responding to our presence." But Dr. Kilthan was wrong. The awakening systems weren't just responding to the Alterian presence. They were responding to something far more significant, happening deep within the ship's medical section. In the ship's primary medical bay, hidden behind layers of armor plating and blast doors, a single cryogenic pod had been monitoring the power fluctuations. As auxiliary systems came online, the pod's ancient medical protocols recognized the activation sequence. After 300 years of patient waiting, it was time. The cryogenic chamber began its warming cycle with mechanical precision. Frost that had accumulated over centuries started melting, running down the transparent aluminum viewing panel in slow rivulets. Inside the pod, a figure that had been frozen in time began showing signs of life. Commander Park Hyun-woo's first sensation was cold, bone-deep, penetrating cold that seemed to reach into his very soul. Then came the tingling as circulation returned to limbs that had been motionless for longer than most civilizations had existed. His enhanced nervous system, designed for extended space combat, began processing the flood of information from the ship's medical scanners. The pod's internal displays flickered to life, showing streams of Korean text that updated him on his situation. Ship status, boarded by hostile forces. Crew status, all personnel confirmed deceased. Mission status, defense protocols activated. Time elapsed, 312 years, 4 months, 17 days. As the warming process continued, Hyun-woo's augmented mind began connecting with the ship's neural network. The Baeko had been more than just his command. It had been his partner, designed to interface directly with his enhanced consciousness. Now, after centuries of separation, they were reuniting. Through the ship's internal sensors, he could see everything. 14 alien creatures moving through his vessel like scavengers picking over a corpse. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and compound eyes, clearly from a species that had evolved in lower gravity. Their equipment was sophisticated, far more advanced than anything humanity had possessed during the Savage Wars. But sophistication wasn't everything in warfare. Hyun-woo had learned that lesson fighting against 3 different alien species that had tried to exterminate humanity. Superior technology meant nothing if you didn't understand your enemy. The ship's translation protocols allowed him to listen to the aliens' conversations, and what he heard made him smile grimly. They were scientists, not soldiers. They viewed humans as primitive barbarians, studying his ship like archaeologists examining ancient weapons. They had no idea they were standing inside a trap that had been specifically designed to kill their species. "Look at these crude projectile weapons," one of the aliens was saying as he examined the ship's armory. "No energy weapons, no plasma. Technology, just metal slugs fired by chemical explosives." If only they knew, Hyun-woo thought. Those crude projectile weapons fired rounds specifically designed to penetrate Alterian armor. The primitive chemical explosives were tailored to disrupt their nervous systems. Every weapon on the ship had been tested against captured Alterian equipment and biology. The Baeko's AI began feeding tactical information directly into Hyun-woo's neural implant. Detailed biological scans of each intruder, analysis of their equipment and weapons, and most importantly, their exact locations throughout the ship. The aliens had spread out to cover more ground, splitting into small groups that would be easy to eliminate individually. As the cryogenic pod completed its revival cycle, Hyun-woo remained perfectly still. The alien sensors showed no life signs from the medical bay, and he intended to keep it that way. Let them continue their research, let them feel safe and superior. The longer they remained overconfident, the easier his job would be. Through the ship's external sensors, he could see their research vessel docked to his hull. It was beautiful in the way that Alterian technology always was, sleek, elegant, and completely unprepared for the kind of warfare humanity had perfected. The crew aboard that ship probably thought their colleagues were conducting a routine archaeological survey. They were about to learn the difference between studying war and living it. The Baeko's weapons systems were coming online, responding to their commander's awakened presence. Security protocols that had been dormant for centuries began cycling through activation sequences. The ship's AI started calculating firing solutions and escape routes, preparing for the battle that was about to begin. Commander Park Hyun-woo finally opened the cryogenic pod and stepped onto the deck of his ship. His body moved with fluid precision, despite 3 centuries of suspension, enhanced muscles and reflexes responding instantly to his commands. He was exactly what he had been designed to be, humanity's answer to superior alien technology. The hunt was about to begin, and these alien scientists were about to receive a very practical education in human warfare. Commander Park Hyun-woo stepped out of his cryogenic pod like a ghost materializing from the shadows. His bare feet made no sound on the cold metal deck, as his enhanced nervous system quickly adapted to being awake after 3 centuries. Every muscle, every reflex, every combat instinct that had made him humanity's deadliest weapon was now fully operational. The ship recognized its master's return. Throughout the Baeko, systems that had been dormant began responding to his neural commands. The vessel's AI whispered tactical updates directly into his consciousness through microscopic implants that interfaced with his enhanced brain. 14 hostiles confirmed. Species, Alterian. Threat level, minimal. Elimination Protocols, authorized, Dr. Kilthon was 3 decks above, completely absorbed in examining what his scanners identified as a crude human sidearm. The weapon looked primitive compared to Alterian energy pistols, just a simple metal tube with basic targeting systems and what appeared to be chemical propellant chambers. Fascinating, Dr. Kilthon muttered to his assistant, a younger Alterian named Pelcox, who was documenting everything with recording equipment. Look at this targeting system. No advanced computing, no predictive algorithms, just basic optical. Sights. He picked up the weapon, turning it over in his 4-fingered hands. The metal felt rough and unfinished compared to the smooth surfaces of Alterian technology. Everything about it screamed primitive engineering and brute force solutions. The psychological implications are interesting, Dr. Kilthon continued, activating his recording device. This weapon design suggests a species that relies on individual skill rather than technological assistance. Very telling about their primitive mindset. As he spoke, the lights in the corridor flickered. Dr. Kilthon barely noticed, too focused on his analysis to pay attention to minor power fluctuations. Probably just the auxiliary system cycling, he told Pelcox dismissively, but the weapon in his hands was no primitive sidearm. It was a neural disruptor, specifically designed and calibrated to target Alterian brain chemistry. 300 years ago, human scientists had studied captured Alterian technology and biology, learning exactly how their nervous systems functioned. This weapon was the result of that research. When Dr. Kilthon accidentally triggered the activation sequence by pressing what he thought was a safety mechanism, the device emitted a focused electromagnetic pulse tuned to the exact frequency that disrupted Alterian neural pathways. Pelcox collapsed instantly, his compound eyes going blank as his consciousness simply ceased to exist. The young researcher's body hit the deck with a soft thud, neural pathways permanently scrambled by frequencies that were harmless to humans but devastating to his species. Dr. Kilthon stared in shock at his fallen assistant, not understanding what had happened. The weapon hadn't made any sound, hadn't produced any visible energy discharge, yet somehow Pelcox was dead. Throughout the ship, other systems that the Alterians had dismissed as crude human technology began revealing their true purpose. In the main corridor where Navigator Vorex was studying what appeared to be simple blast doors, the barriers suddenly slammed shut with mechanical precision. The doors moved so fast that one team member barely managed to dive through before being separated from his colleagues. "What's happening?" Vorex shouted into her communicator, but the ship's internal communication system was now under Hyunwoo's control. Her words were heard, recorded and analyzed, but no response came. The atmospheric processors that the Alterians had identified as primitive life support systems began introducing trace compounds into the air. To human lungs, these chemicals were harmless, but Alterian respiratory systems, which processed oxygen differently due to their evolution in low-gravity environments, began struggling. The aliens found themselves becoming lightheaded and disoriented as their breathing became labored. Even worse were the gravity generators. What the research team had assumed were simple artificial gravity systems were actually sophisticated field manipulators. As Hyunwoo activated different settings throughout the ship, localized gravity fields began shifting and changing. Alterians, with their 4-chambered inner ears designed for consistent gravitational orientation, became severely disoriented as the floors seemed to tilt and spin around them. "Emergency!" Navigator Vorex screamed into her communicator, her voice high with panic. "The ship is hunting us. Repeat, the ship is actively hunting us." But the real hunter was moving through passages that didn't appear on any of the schematics the Alterians had studied. The Beko had been designed with hidden maintenance shafts, concealed corridors, and secret passages that allowed its crew to move unseen throughout the vessel. Now Hyunwoo used these routes like arteries in a body, flowing silently from section to section. His enhanced senses, sharpened by centuries of genetic modification and cybernetic enhancement, tracked each alien through multiple sensory inputs. He could hear their rapid heartbeats, smell their fear pheromones, and feel the vibrations of their footsteps through the ship's hull. To him, they were as obvious as signal flares in the darkness. Research technician Yelmora, the one who had accidentally triggered the ship's awakening, found himself separated from the others in a storage bay filled with what appeared to be spare equipment. He pressed himself against a wall, trying to contact his team through his personal communicator. Yunwu dropped from a ventilation shaft directly behind him, moving with the fluid grace of an apex predator. In his hand was a blade that looked like simple metal, but vibrated at frequencies specifically calculated to disrupt Alterian cellular structure on contact. The kill was quick and silent. Yelmora's biosignature simply vanished from the team's scanners, leaving no trace of what had happened to him. 2 more researchers met the same fate in the following minutes. Each death was precise, calculated, and completely invisible to their colleagues' advanced scanning equipment. The Alterians found themselves facing an enemy that their superior technology couldn't detect or predict. Dr. Kilthan, still standing over his assistant's body, finally began to understand the horrible truth. The weapon in his hands wasn't primitive. It was specifically designed to kill his species. The ship's systems weren't malfunctioning. They were executing a program that had been written centuries ago. "We're not studying a primitive warship," he whispered into his recorder, his voice shaking with terror. "We're trapped inside a killing machine, a machine designed specifically to hunt us. The Beko had been waiting for 300 years for exactly this scenario. Every system, every weapon, every seemingly crude design choice had been calculated to lure in overconfident enemies and then destroy them with ruthless efficiency. And Commander Park Hyun-woo was just getting started. The corridors of the Beko had become a nightmare maze for the 7 surviving Alterians. What had started as a routine scientific expedition had turned into a desperate fight for survival against an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't understand. Dr. Kilthan pressed his back against a bulkhead, his 4 eyes darting nervously between the sealed blast doors that trapped his remaining team in a narrow maintenance corridor. His breathing was labored, not just from fear but from the atmospheric compounds that the ship continued to pump through its life support systems. Every breath felt like breathing through thick liquid. "The weapon systems aren't crude," he gasped. Into his personal recorder, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're specifically designed. Every component, every tactical consideration. They've fought our species before. This isn't primitive technology. This is specialized hunting equipment." Captain Nexara tried to maintain control of the situation, her silver uniform now torn and stained, with the strange lubricants that seemed to seep from the ship's walls. "Status report," she demanded through her communicator. "All remaining personnel, report your positions." Only 6 voices responded. Another team member had vanished sometime in the last 10 minutes, his biosignature simply disappearing from their scanners, without any indication of what had happened to him. "We need to reach the docking bay," Science Officer Melkara said, her voice shaking. "Our ship has superior firepower. If we can just get back to the Veltara, we can destroy this cursed vessel from the outside." But even as she spoke, the ship seemed to respond to their conversation. Blast doors that had been open moments before suddenly slammed shut, cutting off their path to the docking bay. Alternative routes that their mapping software had identified were blocked by what appeared to be hull breaches, though no alarms indicated actual atmospheric loss. Then Commander Park Hyun-woo's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, speaking perfect Alterian through the translation matrix. His words were calm, almost conversational, but they carried a weight that made the surviving aliens freeze in terror. "You wanted to study human warfare," he said, his voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Consider this a practical demonstration of what you call our primitive tactics." Navigator Vorex spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice. "Where are you, human? Show yourself and fight with honor." A soft chuckle echoed through the speakers. "Honor? You board my ship to study us like specimens, and you talk about honor? You're not warriors. You're tourists who wandered into a predator's den." Captain Nexara tried to rally her surviving crew, drawing her energy weapon and scanning the corridors for any sign of their tormentor. "He's just one human," she shouted, as much to convince herself as her team. "We have superior technology, superior numbers, we can—" Her words were cut short as the corridor's gravity suddenly reversed. The 7 Alterians were slammed upward against the ceiling with bone-crushing force, their equipment scattering as they fought to orient themselves. Just as they began to adjust to the new gravity orientation, it snapped back to normal, sending them crashing to the deck below. The impact left Navigator Vorex with a broken arm and Science Officer Melkara unconscious. The remaining team members struggled to their feet, their sophisticated equipment damaged and their confidence shattered. "Impossible," Dr. Kilthan whispered, staring at the gravity generators built into the walls around them. "These systems aren't just for artificial gravity. They're 3-dimensional combat tools." The Beko had been designed for warfare against enemies who thought in terms of technological superiority rather than tactical adaptation. Every corridor could become a weapon, every room a trap. The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a living weapon system that could reconfigure itself to hunt specific enemies. As the Alterians tried to regroup, they began to notice other systems revealing their true purposes. The rough-looking armor plating that they had dismissed as crude engineering was actually a sophisticated composite material. When Dr. Kilthan desperately fired his energy weapon at what he thought was a weak point in the wall, the beam was absorbed and redirected, nearly striking one of his own team members. "The hull plating is designed to counter our weapons," he realized with growing horror. "It's not primitive armor, it's a specific defense against Alterian energy technology." Even the sensor arrays they had catalogued as basic human technology were revealing their true sophistication. These weren't crude detection systems. They were specifically tuned to track Alterian biosignatures through any countermeasures their species might use. The ship could see them no matter where they hid, no matter what jamming equipment they deployed. Commander Park Hyun-woo moved through the ship like a phantom, using passages and access routes that didn't appear on any schematic. He would appear just long enough to eliminate another team member, then vanish before the survivors could react. Each kill was precise, calculated, and demonstrated an intimate knowledge of Alterian physiology. Research technician Tokvaran tried to hide in what appeared to be a storage compartment, only to discover too late that it was actually a trap designed to contain and eliminate intruders. His screams echoed through the ship's communication system before cutting off abruptly. The remaining 6 Alterians found themselves being herded, like prey animals driven toward a specific location. Every path they tried to take was blocked or redirected. Every hiding place they discovered turned out to be a carefully prepared killing ground. Slowly but inevitably, they were being pushed toward the ship's central hub. "He's not just hunting us," Science Officer Melkara realized as she regained consciousness. "He's studying us, learning our responses, our tactics, our weaknesses." Dr. Kilthan nodded grimly, understanding the horrible truth. "We came here to study human warfare, but we're the specimens now. This entire ship is a laboratory designed to perfect the art of killing our species." Through the ship's internal sensors, Commander Park Hyun-woo watched their growing terror with professional interest. Each reaction, each desperate attempt at survival, each tactical decision was being recorded and analyzed. The Beko's databases were being updated with real-time information about Alterian combat psychology and survival instincts. This wasn't just about eliminating intruders. This was about gathering intelligence that would help humanity fight future conflicts against the Alterian Empire. Every moment of their terror, every tactical mistake they made, every weakness they revealed, was valuable data. The surviving Alterians were no longer researchers studying primitive human technology. They were test subjects in an experiment that had been running for 3 centuries, waiting for exactly this opportunity to gather fresh data about their species' capabilities and limitations. And the experiment was far from over. The ship's command center had become a tomb for the living. Only 3 Alterians remained from the original research team of 14, huddled together in the center of what had once been the Beko's bridge. Dr. Kilthan, Captain Nexara, and Navigator Vorex pressed against each other, their pale, blue skins slicked with sweat, as the atmosphere around them grew thicker and more difficult to breathe. The command center's blast doors had sealed shut 20 minutes ago, trapping them inside, while the ship's environmental systems slowly adjusted the air composition. What the Alterians didn't realize was that the atmosphere was being specifically tailored to keep them alive but weakened, conscious enough to receive a message, but too disoriented to fight back. Dr. Kilthan's 4 eyes darted frantically around the chamber, taking in details he had missed during their initial survey. The command stations weren't just functional workspaces. They were positioned to provide perfect firing angles for defensive positions. The walls weren't simply armored. They contained hidden weapon ports that could emerge at a moment's notice. Even the lighting system was designed to create shadows that could conceal a defender while exposing attackers. "This whole room is a trap," he whispered to his companions, his voice hoarse from the strange atmosphere. "Every single design element is meant to give the ship's crew an advantage in close combat." Navigator Vorex clutched her broken arm against her chest, her normally precise movements now clumsy and painful. How could we have been so wrong about their technology? Our intelligence report said they were centuries behind us in development. Intelligence. Reports can be deceiving, Captain Nexara replied grimly, though her own confidence had been completely shattered. Especially when the enemy wants you to underestimate them. The command center's main display screens suddenly flickered to life, showing images from throughout the ship. Security camera footage played in sequence, documenting the systematic elimination of their research team. Each death had been recorded in perfect detail, showing not primitive brutality, but calculated precision. Then the doors hissed open, and Commander Park Hyunwoo stepped into the chamber. The human moved with fluid grace that spoke of centuries of genetic enhancement and cybernetic augmentation. His combat suit wasn't the crude armor the Alterians had expected. It was a sophisticated piece of technology that interfaced directly with his nervous system. Data streams flowed across his helmet's display, showing detailed biological information about each survivor. In his hands was a weapon that the Alterians now recognized with terrifying clarity. What they had originally catalogued as a primitive club was actually a resonance weapon, capable of disrupting matter at the molecular level. The crude metal surface contained sophisticated electronics that could adjust frequency patterns for different target materials. "Please," Dr. Kilthan whispered, his voice barely audible as terror overwhelmed his scientific training. "We meant no harm. We were just scientists trying to understand your species. We're researchers, not warriors." Commander Park Hyunwoo studied the 3 survivors with the same clinical detachment they had shown when examining his ship. His enhanced eyes recorded every detail of their physiological responses: heart rate, breathing patterns, stress hormones, fear pheromones. All of it was valuable data for future encounters with their species. "Scientists," he repeated, his voice calm and measured despite the translation matrix that converted his words into perfect Alterian. "You boarded a human military vessel to study our so-called barbaric nature. You wanted to understand how such primitive creatures could possibly survive in a galaxy filled with superior civilizations." He gestured toward the wall displays, where footage of their colleagues' deaths continued to play. "You've learned. The question now is what you'll do with that knowledge." Dr. Kilthan tried to speak, but only managed a strangled sound. The reality of their situation had finally penetrated his scientific mind. They hadn't been studying human technology. They had been experiencing it firsthand as test subjects. Captain Nexara, drawing on her military training, tried to maintain some semblance of dignity in the face of certain death. "What do you want from us, human? Why haven't you killed us already?" "Because dead messengers can't deliver messages," Hyunwoo replied simply. "I want you to carry information back to your people. Tell them that this ship, the Baiko, wasn't a derelict floating dead in space. It was waiting. We've been fighting, species like yours, for centuries, learning from every encounter, adapting to every new threat, preparing for every possible scenario." The command center's holographic systems activated, displaying images that made the 3 Alterians gasp in horror. Dozens of similar vessels appeared in the air around them, scattered across different star systems throughout the galaxy. Each ship looked derelict and abandoned, But now the survivors understood the truth. Every one of our so-called primitive warships represents a lesson learned from defeating enemies who thought technological superiority alone made them invincible. Hyunwoo continued, walking slowly around the huddled aliens. We don't just fight wars and move on. We study our enemies, understand their psychology, analyze their tactics, and design specific solutions for destroying them. Navigator Vorex stared at the holographic fleet with growing comprehension. You're not just soldiers, you're researchers. Too, you've been studying us just as we tried to study you. The difference, Hyunwoo said with a slight smile, is that we study our enemies to kill them more efficiently. You studied us to satisfy your curiosity about primitive species. He stepped closer to the terrified aliens, and they could see their own reflections in his helmet's visor. Your species now faces a choice. You can leave human space alone and continue your peaceful scientific endeavors in other parts of the galaxy. Or you can test us further and discover exactly how many lessons we've learned about killing Alterians specifically. The ship's AI began, displaying technical specifications that made Dr. Kilthan's scientific mind reel with horrified fascination. Weapons designed to target Alterian neural patterns, atmospheric compounds that specifically interfered with their respiratory systems, gravitational effects calibrated to disrupt their inner ear balance. Every system had been tailored to fight their exact species. How long have you been preparing for war with us? Captain Nexara asked, though she dreaded the answer. Since the first time we encountered your kind, 350 years ago, Hyunwoo replied. Every diplomatic contact, every trade negotiation, every cultural exchange has been an opportunity to gather intelligence. We've been studying you far longer than you've been studying us. The blast doors opened with a mechanical hiss, revealing the corridor that led back to their docking port. The three survivors looked at the opening with disbelief. They were actually being allowed to leave. Go, Hyunwoo commanded. Carry this message back to your people. Tell them what you've learned about human warfare. Make sure they understand that we don't fight to conquer or destroy civilizations. We fight to ensure that our enemies never want to fight us again. The three Alterians scrambled toward the exit, expecting at any moment to feel weapons fire cutting them down. But Commander Park Hyunwoo simply watched them go, making final observations about their retreat patterns and survival psychology. As the Alterian research vessel Veltara undocked and fled into deep space, its crew broadcasting emergency warnings. To their home fleet, the Beko began powering down once again. Lights dimmed throughout the corridors, environmental systems returned to minimal operation, and the ship took on the appearance of a derelict once more. Commander Park Hyunwoo made his way back to the medical bay, where his cryogenic pod waited, with patient mechanical precision. As he settled back into the chamber, the ship's AI whispered status updates directly into his consciousness. Mission accomplished, data collected, message delivered. The trap was reset, ready for the next species that would mistake human ingenuity for primitive barbarism. Somewhere in the void, other human warships continued their patient wait, each one a carefully prepared lesson in the cost of underestimating humanity's capacity for adaptive warfare. The Alterians would carry their warning back to their people, but there would always be other species, other civilizations that believed superior technology made them invincible, and humanity would be ready for them, just as they had been ready for every enemy they had ever faced. The message was clear and would echo across the galaxy. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to ensure their enemies never wanted to fight them again. The end.